All right, today we're going to unpack a really fascinating legal puzzle. It all starts with a single, pretty modest paycheck, and it ends with a landmark ruling that brought some much needed mathematical clarity to family law. So let's get right into it. So, at the heart of this whole thing is a very human question, right? One that really pits the need for survival against our legal and moral obligations. I mean, just imagine you're the judge for a second. How would you solve this? I'll tell you, the answer is not as simple as you might think. And here it is. This is the number that kicked this whole thing off. This was the husband's net monthly salary when the case reached the high court. Just under 7,000 rupees. That is not a lot of money, especially when you've got a family of 3 depending on it. This one little number sets the stage for a pretty dramatic legal battle. So you're probably wondering, how does such a small salary become the center of a major court case? Well, it all began with an initial court order that seemed, let's just say, completely unsustainable on its face. The setup is pretty straightforward. You've got the husband, who worked as a diploma engineer. After he and his wife separated, she and their child needed financial support, which we call maintenance. So it was the court's job to figure out what a fair amount would be. And get this is the number the lower court decided on. 5,000 rupees a month for the wife and child as what's called interim maintenance. Now remember, the husband's total take-home pay we just talked about? Yeah, out of a salary of just under 7,000 rupees, 5,000 of it was ordered to go to maintenance. That's about 77% of his income. It left him with less than 2,000 rupees, just 23%, to cover all of his own expenses. We're talking food, a place to live, getting to work, everything. And this, right here, was the core of the husband's appeal. His lawyers basically argued that, look, while he absolutely has a responsibility to his family, the court's order made it impossible for him to even survive. It was, they said, a violation of his right to live with basic human dignity. Of course, there are always 2 sides to a story, right? The wife argued that 5,000 rupees was a perfectly reasonable and necessary amount to support herself and their child. And she pointed out that her husband had a stable job and, the financial ability to provide for them. So the real challenge for the court was how to balance these 2 competing and very valid needs. Okay, this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. The case makes its way up to the Delhi High Court, which ends up introducing a simple but frankly brilliant formula that would totally change how these kinds of cases were handled from then on. The judge who heard this appeal was Justice Shiv Narayan Dhingra, and he saw that what was really needed here was a more consistent and fair approach, something that moved away from decisions that could be, purely subjective. So he articulated a principle that had kind of been evolving in the background of judicial practice. And the solution is what's often called the Jagdish formula, named after this very case. The logic behind it is actually pretty elegant. The person earning the salary is also, in a way, a dependent on that salary. So it only makes sense that they should be entitled to keep half of it for their own survival. The other half is then what's available to be divided among the other dependents. So here's how it breaks down. It's super simple. First, you take the net salary. Second, you just split it right down the middle. One part is for the person earning the money. The other half is for the dependents, in this situation, the wife and the child. It ensures the earner isn't left with nothing, while still making sure they provide substantial support. It's logical, it's simple, and it's a process you can repeat. Now, the impact of this one decision, it went way beyond just this one family. It actually created a legacy of clarity and consistency in Indian family law that's still felt today. Just look at the difference the formula made. It's pretty dramatic. The lower court's order left the husband with less than 2,000 rupees. But the high court's ruling, using the formula, split the income down the middle. It gave about 3,400 rupees to the husband and the other half to his wife and child. You can see it's a much more balanced and, frankly, sustainable outcome for everyone. So why does this one case matter so much? Well, this judgment brought real mathematical clarity to a process that was often kind of vague. It helped create consistency from one court to another. It prevented these really extreme or excessive awards that could financially ruin one person. And ultimately, it aimed for a sense of fairness for everybody involved. It really became a benchmark for cases that followed. And all of this leaves us with a final big thought-provoking question. The Jagdish formula brought some much-needed clarity and fairness, for sure. But
Can a mathematical rule ever truly account for the incredibly complex, unique circumstances of every single family? While it serves as a really important guideline, it's not some ironclad law, which is good because it still leaves room for judges to use their discretion in really exceptional cases. It's just a fascinating debate, isn't it? The balance between predictable rules and the messy nuances of human lives.